What you don't know is that Dennis and Sam were at K-State together, and they both had an afro at the time.
I've seen yours. I did. He did.
We've got 1 week to go.
Come on, guys.
We're going to do this. Are you ready? "50 years ago today, this day, there was one of the most important political speeches ever given, and it was from Ronald Reagan. And the title of that speech was, 'A Time to Choose.' Is that what we need in Kansas? I had the honor to work for President Reagan, and I've also had the honor of working with Sam Brownback and being his friend for 25 years. And Sam Brownback is a guy that I know has Ronald Reagan's head and his heart. And that's going to lead the state of Kansas over the next 4 years, and we're going to win this election. So we're going to need your help. So tell me, do you want to have Obamacare, or do you want to have doctors who care in Kansas? Do you want to have somebody that is for big government, Obama big government, or Reagan, small government? Do we want more jobs in Kansas or more government? Jobs. We're going to win this election, and we're going to win this with your help. We need you to get out and talk to your friends, and you need to tell them a couple of facts, a couple of numbers you need to remember. One of those numbers is 58,000. Another number you need to know is 20,000. And the third number you need to know is 13,000. You know what those numbers are? Between 2000 and 2010, the period of greatest growth in the history of the United States, that's when the Democrats were in charge here, Kansas lost private sector jobs. In the last 3 years, under Governor Brownback and these leaders like Ray Merrick and Bill Sutton here, we now have 58,000 more private sector jobs in Kansas. Another thing that we did is we have 20,000 fewer people on welfare than 3 years ago. And we're now spending more than $13,000 for every single pupil in a Kansas school. With Speaker Ray Merrick, this legislature, and this governor, we now have 673 more teachers than we did 3 years ago. And we're saving money, too, by making government smaller. Under Governor Brownback, we now have 3,000 fewer state employees than we did 3 years ago. So get out there, talk to your friends. Make sure you tell them we're going to win this election, and let them know 58,000 new private sector jobs, more than at any time in the history of the state, more money for schools than at any time in the history of the state. Kansas is working, and there is a huge difference. And that difference is my friend, Sam Brownback.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you guys for being out here, too. Thank you. Thanks, Dennis, for opening the place up and letting us hurt your productivity, although I understand you're going to put a big laser cutter in back here. So this is a good Kansas investment. Glad to see it. Creating more jobs, investments here in Kansas. Thanks for doing that. Great company. Jeff, thank you. His wife, Ruth, is here, and a couple of their daughters. Ruth, thank you guys for being out. Appreciate you guys coming as well. And the obvious, go Royals! Right? Got to get them across the line. We've got 2 games. We've got to win them both, and we're back home. So let's get this on done. Bobby Jindal's oldest son is a big Royals fan now. So I'm glad to hear that he's in, and he's telling his dad, he's walking his dad through how baseball goes. He's 8 years old, so he's explaining it all to his dad. Anyway, I'm glad he's a Royals fan, but that's the case. Everybody in America, the Royals are now America's team, for everybody outside of Nancy Pelosi's congressional district. So, you know, we got the right team, we got the right place, and we got to surge it right here at the end. You guys are kind to be out. We've got to push very aggressively here at the end of this campaign. You got to push for my race for governor. Got to push for Pat Roberts. Both of these are key elections. The country is watching Kansas. We're not used to being in this spot. Usually it's some other place that people are watching, but in this state now you got two key races. The U.S. Senate, who's controlling the U.S. Senate, could be decided by who's elected in Kansas. Vote for Pat Roberts, not Greg Orman. Help Pat Roberts out. Push him on across the line. It needs to happen. He's a good man. He's done good work. And Greg Orman, not sure where he's going to vote on these things. I guess he's out in Hollywood fundraising right now, but Pat isn't. He was here. I was just with him. Mitt Romney was here with a group of us, supporting me, supporting Jeff, and supporting Pat Roberts to get him on across the line. Got to push on that one. You got to push on this race. This race is a key one. The Wall Street Journal had an article today, Why Liberals Hate Kansas. And it's worth reading. You ought to go online and catch it. But a big piece of it is we want to grow. Our focus is growing. We want to get growth happening, because if you get growth happening, you get more jobs. You get more jobs, people's wages go up because there's more competition. You get more income coming into the state of Kansas. You get more public receipts, and you can put more money into public sector areas like in schools and roads. It creates a virtuous cycle as you grow. So we reduced our taxes in Kansas, reduced income taxes for everybody, went to zero on small business, because in small business, that's where most people work. 3/4 of Kansans work for a small business or themselves. And that's who's creating the jobs, and now we're at record employment in the state of Kansas. More people are working in Kansas than ever before, than ever in the history of the state, and that's happening right now. And tax policy, that's one of the things that we focused on. And in this Kansas City area, we're growing private sector jobs on the Kansas side of Kansas City 3 times faster than on the Missouri side. Growth is happening. We've got to keep pushing that on forward. Jeff mentioned our investment in schools, record investment in schools that we've taken into the state of Kansas. There are a number of legislators here that have done that and helped with pushing it. Now, a number of the teachers' union, they haven't been very happy, because the legislature said, okay, we're going to do away with the mandate on tenure statewide, and saying that's a local issue now. Well, the teachers' union didn't like that, so they've been pushing hard the other way. Well, we need to push back on our side of it and say, look, we've got record investment, and if you want to use a tenure issue, do it on a local level. You can have tenure in Olathe School District or Gardner Edgerton School District or wherever the case might be. But the statewide mandate is done on that. And we fixed the pension system in the state of Kansas. Jeff led the work for us to fix the Medicaid system, where we were having to cut payments to providers. Instead, we went to a CanCare system where we've added 80,000 people on Medicaid through CanCare, and we've added more services to people. So we've got a system that's working, and we've got to tell people about it, and this is the final surge. And I'd also add one other thing I'd remind you about, judges. It's real important on who you pick for governor if you want a court that stays within the bounds of the law. I'm appointing and will appoint conservative judges. Paul Davis will appoint liberal judges. One of the justices, at her home, there was a fundraiser for Paul Davis that her husband held. Now, she's saying, well, I wasn't so sure about what was going on there. I can't believe that. I mean, that just seems pretty strange to me. But he wants to appoint liberal judges. And I think that is not where Kansas values are. And speaking of Kansas values, I am pro-life. I support a culture of life. I think that's important. Paul Davis has an extreme position on abortion. He supported partial birth abortions continuing in the state of Kansas, and even gender selection abortions continuing. Now you can say, okay, I'm pro-choice, but there are very few people. There were like 20 people in the whole legislature that voted for that position, and he was one of them. And then on same-sex marriage, I support marriage as a union of a man and a woman. He's on the other side of that issue. But here's a bigger point even about that. Here's a key point about that. This is now in the courts, and I will defend the Kansas Constitution in the court. The Attorney General will defend the Kansas Constitution in the court. I swore an oath of office to defend the Constitution. Paul Davis won't even say if he would defend the Kansas Constitution. Won't even say if he'll defend it. Now, what kind of leadership is that? It's a very clear choice. I'm a Reagan-style Republican. He's an Obama-style Democrat. He is the Nancy Pelosi of Kansas. He is the Democrat Minority Leader Speaker. He's the Nancy Pelosi of Kansas. Yes, that's his. He's the minority leader in the Kansas House, and he takes those sorts of positions. Now, if that's what your neighbors, your friends and neighbors want to elect as governor, they need to know that. My guess is they don't. They want to support somebody like me. More of a Reagan-style, pro-growth, pro-family, pro-freedom governor for the state of Kansas to continue to lead the Kansas comeback. And to Jeff and I, the Kansas comeback is your kids and grandkids coming back to Kansas, because we have jobs, we have opportunities, we have things happening in the state of Kansas. That's the Kansas comeback. And we're finally seeing it take place. For years, we lost people and wealth to all our surrounding states but Nebraska. Now we're getting people and wealth from all our surrounding states but Colorado, who still has lower income taxes than us. And by the way, we're beating Missouri. Which for a lot of folks, you're looking at that going, okay, that is key. That is important. Here to talk and is a good friend of mine, and I'm just delighted that he is here. Bobby Jindal, somebody that I've known in Congress, I've known as a friend, I've known as a governor. He's one of the intellectuals in the political process, but he's very humble about it, and he's very open and kind. I've traveled around a lot with him. He's an all-around good guy, or as people would say here, he's good people. He's good people, good man, good family, good governor, one of the great political leaders in the United States. Give a great big Kansas welcome to the governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal.
Thank y'all very, very much. Thank you. Thank y'all for that very warm reception. Thank y'all very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. What a great honor to be here with you. And Sam's exactly right. Got a little 8-year-old boy at home. He's actually a baseball player himself. As a dad, let me just take a 30-second point of privilege. He was in a doubleheader game yesterday. Hits a grand slam home run in the first game. Comes back in the second game as a relief pitcher, bases loaded, strikes out 3 little boys in a row to retire the inning. I told him, enjoy this day, son. You've got my genes. I don't think this is going to happen too many more times. But he is latched on to the Kansas City Royals in the World Series. Indeed, the other night when Kansas City had that great 6th inning, I woke him up in the morning to get ready for school. I said, Slay, you won't believe what happened. After you went to bed, their bats came alive. It was amazing. He looked at me, he smiled, he goes, Daddy, I know. I said, how do you know? You were asleep. He goes, no, I snuck out of bed and I went and watched it on TV. I thought, he's so young, he's too honest to tell me anything but the truth. He found out I was coming today. He was convinced I was coming to watch a baseball game. I said, no, son. I said, as important as the World Series is, this is actually even more important. I'm up here for an important election. Let me tell you why I'm here. I did first get to meet Sam when he was in the Senate when I was a new congressman. And let me tell you, Sam is one of the most principled, most intelligent, most accomplished leaders I've ever met in elected office. Now, I'd like to tell you that is the rule. I'm here to tell you that is the exception. There's no joke, and it's a lot of truth in this joke. There's no joke when you get to Congress. When you're first elected there, you spend your first week walking around the marbled halls of Congress. It's a pretty heady thing. You see the statues, you absorb the history, and you think, how in the world did I get elected here? Then the joke goes, in your second week, you meet your colleagues, and you walk around thinking, how in the world did these bozos get elected here? What are they doing up here? And unfortunately, there's a lot of truth in that. Sam is the exception. He has been a thoughtful, he's been a principled, he's been an accomplished conservative his entire career. And the reason I'm here to support it, we've got too many politicians. We've got too many elected leaders that are simply celebrities. There's a saying in Louisiana too often that politicians, if they see a mob marching on City Hall, they will get in front of it and call it a parade. We got too many politicians that look to the polls to decide what they're for and what they're against. We got too many politicians that change their positions every day. We got too many politicians that read the New York Times editorial page to figure out what they're supposed to think, what they're supposed to believe. Sam Brownback doesn't do that. Here's an amazing thing. He told us what he was going to do, got elected, worked with the legislature, and then actually did what he said he was going to do, and now the liberals are surprised. Well, the problem is they never see that in D.C. You never see that on their side, so they didn't actually expect Sam would actually do what he said he was going to do. You look at his record. Sam made a commitment that he was going to work hard to create jobs for your children and grandchildren. Some of the largest, most aggressive tax cuts you've seen in the country. Reducing the taxes for small businesses, making tax day a little less painful for Kansas families across the state. Reducing the size of government. As a result of 4.8% unemployment rate. The result, 58,000 jobs, higher incomes. At a time where across the country they're calling 2% growth and economic recovery, at a time where you've got record numbers of people dropping out of the workforce, here in Kansas, Sam has shown the conservative principles work. Putting people back to work, bringing your children and grandchildren back. But he didn't stop there. Secondly, he has invested year after year more in education. More teachers working in the classroom, earning a higher pay. Actually saying, we want to put the kids of Kansas first. And he didn't stop there. He has stood up to protect innocent human life. He has stood up against radical judges. And here's the nice thing about this election. I could go on and on about the great things Sam has done for the state of Kansas, for the people of Kansas. But this isn't one of those elections where it's even close. This isn't one of those elections where the opponent is even trying to become or trying to pretend to be a moderate. This is an election, you've got a principled conservative running against a radical, extreme liberal. Let's look at Paul's record. Here's a man who is actually proud of the fact that he's voting for partial birth abortion. Now, I'm proud with Sam to stand on the side of innocent human life, but even people who don't consider themselves pro-life, they consider themselves pro-choice, even most of those folks say you've got to draw a line somewhere. And that line certainly doesn't include partial birth abortion. But it's not just on the life issue. You've got a state representative who has stood with the radical judges, who has supported and defended judicial activism. You've got in Paul a man who says he is embracing, he is doubling down on Obamacare even as other Democrats are running away from Obamacare. Saying he wants to implement Obamacare in Kansas, and by the way, won't even tell us where he's going to find the $1 billion to pay for it. This is the Obama playbook. Promise people everything, don't tell them how you're going to pay for it, and then run up the debt so that our children and our grandchildren have to pay for it. Nearly $18 trillion in D.C., and here in Kansas, you've got a candidate for governor saying, I'm going to spend $1 billion, and I'm not even going to tell you where I'm going to find the money. I'll tell you where he'll find the money. He'll raise your taxes. He'll cut funding for classrooms. He'll cut funding for transportation. That's where he's going to find this money. I can tell you more about his radical record, but you've got a clear choice. You can stay the course, you can grow your economy, or you can go the way of a, not one time, but a two-time Obama delegate. Let's be clear what this election's about. First and foremost, this election is about Kansas. This is about whether we want to continue creating jobs, protecting innocent human life, cutting taxes, controlling the size of government. That's the Sam path. That's the Brownback path. But there's a different path. And there's a reason the entire country is watching. There is so much wrong with Washington, D.C. One of the most fundamental things that President Obama is trying to do, and Paul would try to do here, is redefine the American dream. Listen carefully when they talk. Look at their policies. To them, the American dream is about redistribution. To them, it's about dividing us by class, by gender, by age, by geography. To them, it's about equality of outcomes, not equality of opportunity. That's not the American dream. Your Lieutenant Governor talked about Ronald Reagan. Reagan reminded us, my parents taught me, the American dream is that we live in a country whose best days are always ahead of us. We live in a country where the circumstances of your birth don't determine your outcomes as an adult. You don't have to be born in the right zip code. You don't have to be born in the right neighborhood, the right race, the right gender to do great things in this country. Every generation leaves more opportunities to our children than we inherited from our parents. Every mom and dad has told their little sons, their little daughters, you can be the first in our family to get an education. You can be the first to start a business, to go to school. You can be the first to be a farmer, a lawyer, a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, whatever you dream of becoming. The great thing about America is we offer freedom, we offer opportunity. The American dream is not about more government spending, borrowing, more government regulations, more government involvement in our lives. That's what President Obama is trying to do. He's trying to change our culture, trying to change the American dream. We must not let Paul do that here in the state of Kansas. The reason the country is watching is this is an important election. First and foremost for you, the people of Kansas, but also because the radical left is trying to say to the country, they're trying to tell the country that our view is better, that we're going to change the American dream. I'll close with this. Two final thoughts. You know, Mark Twain said the older you get, the smarter your parents become. I don't know about you, my wife and I, we got 3 young kids at home, 12-year-old girl, 10-year-old boy, and 8-year-old boy. And I hate it, but I'm turning into my dad every day. I say things my dad used to say, and it drives me crazy, but I do it. My dad's 1 and 9, the only one that got past the 5th grade, grew up in a house without electricity, without running water. I know because we heard those stories every single day. Grew up in a farming community, and he's a good man. He loved us, but he was a tough, tough father. And so I remember him telling us things like, well, son, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? Hated when he said that, didn't understand when he said that. Say it to my kids all the time. My dad used to also tell my brother and me growing up, as long as you live in my house, under my roof, you don't live in a democracy. This is a dictatorship. You're living under my rules. Well, I hated when he said it. I say it to my kids all the time. Every now and then they come home and try to protest to me about all the rights that guy. I say, you don't have any rights in this house. But one of the things my dad used to say to me, I didn't really understand. Not until I had kids. I didn't fully understand this as a little boy. My dad would tell my brother and me when we were young. Say, sons, I'm not leaving you an inheritance. I'm not leaving you a famous last name. But I am going to work hard to make sure you get a good education. So if you get a good education, there's no limit on what you can accomplish in this great country. But he also taught us this. He'd say every night, you need to get on your knees. You need to give thanks to God Almighty that you are blessed to be born in the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States of America. Now, I'll be honest with you, I didn't understand fully what he was trying to teach us. Of course I was born in America. Where else I was going to be born? Everybody I knew was born here. All my friends at school, all my neighbors, so I didn't really understand what he was trying to teach me. But now I do. Our 40th president reminded us, we are the shining city on the hill. But every generation has to choose for itself to renew those principles of freedom. It's not something magical in our soil. It's not etched in our DNA. It's not even inevitable. It's not because of the oceans that protect us. Our founding fathers were wise and smart enough to trust us with freedom. In our founding documents, they said government's role was to protect our God-given rights. Not our government-given rights, our God-given rights. But our 40th president reminded us every generation has to renew those principles of freedom. We're only one generation away from their extinction. And whereas we can help the world, there's no other country that can relight that flame were it ever to go out in this special land. That's what these elections are about. Every generation before us has made the sacrifice, made the right choice. This is our turn. It starts in Kansas, but it also involves taking back our government in D.C. We need a hostile takeover of D.C. And it certainly does not mean giving Harry Reid another 2 years, so that includes getting Pat Roberts reelected as well. My final word is this. I understand what my dad was trying to teach me. I teach that to my little kids now too. Every night, whether they brush their teeth, put on their pajamas or not, they say their prayers. Whether they want to or not. That's how we were raised, that's how they're raised. By the way, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good way to raise kids. But with your help, we can make sure that our children and grandchildren will be able to say the same prayer my dad taught me to say every night, which is to thank God Almighty we were blessed to be born in the greatest country in the history of the world, but let's do our part. My request to you is not only do I want you to go and vote for Sam, I want you to go and tell your friends and your neighbors this is going to be a close election. He has made big changes. He has made the coalition for the status quo mad. He has upset the entrenched interests because he actually did what he said he was going to do. Now, in the old days in Louisiana, they would tell you to go out and vote early and often. We don't do that anymore in Louisiana. I know you don't do that vote like that in Kansas, so I'm not going to ask you to do that, but I am going to ask you, tell 5 people, ask them to tell 5 people, this will be a close election. Sam is going to win, but we need you to go tell everybody you know, and then tell them to tell everybody they know. Nobody better stay home. Nobody better get complacent. Go vote. Let's make sure Kansas stays on the right path. God bless y'all. Thank y'all very much.
I looked at it before I got here. I know y'all have at least a salesperson now.